Welcome to the Civics Academy election series for Zimbabwe. In these videos, we explore different aspects of elections and why they are a central feature of democracy. In this video, we look at why we as citizens of Zimbabwe should vote. Life in Zimbabwe poses many challenges, and we all have different ideas about how to make our country a better place in which to live. In any democracy, the power and right to govern should therefore ultimately lie with the people. During the colonial era, millions of black Zimbabweans were forced to live under the decisions of a government for which they were not allowed to vote. The right to vote was one of the most important driving forces behind the liberation struggle. The principle of one man, one vote is the cornerstone of a democratic and free society and the basis for equality. But because we cannot all be politicians, we delegate this representative power to our political leaders. To do this, we vote. When we vote in elections, we choose who we think should represent us and our interests in government. By voting for them, we give permission or a mandate to politicians to take decisions on our behalf. That's what we call a representative democracy. All our democratic representatives are expected to respect the country's constitution and represent voters' interests when governing the country. Now, how does voting benefit us ordinary people? It is important to understand that when we vote, we don't just choose a political party or certain politicians, but we influence the future of our country. If your community needed to vote on an issue, but very few people participated in the process, this could result in unpopular decisions being taken. Let's say, for example, there are 1,000 people in your community, and only 100 of those 1,000 came out to vote. And of the 100 people who voted, 80 people chose to vote for a very unpopular position. This means that 80% of those who voted supported the unpopular option. If everyone has to abide by the decision, it will not reflect the will of the majority, since less than 10% of the community chose to or were able to vote. So, even if we feel dissatisfied with the choices offered by our political parties, it is still important to vote, even if it's for the least bad option. Declining to vote does not punish candidates or political parties. It simply means that fewer people vote the winner into power. Political leaders and parties make decisions that affect our lives. They formulate and implement policies about issues such as healthcare, education, housing, water, and sanitation. And they also have an enormous amount of power over the money we pay to government as taxes. Thus, we should think carefully about who we want in positions of power. When we think about who to vote for, we should look at their policies and whether we think the party will be responsive to our interests and needs. It is also important to examine the personal qualities of candidates and vote for leaders who we think will obey the laws, spend tax monies wisely, and not use it for themselves or on their friends or family. In a democracy, elections are held regularly. In Zimbabwe, they take place every 5 years. Elections allow us to assess our current government's performance in the previous 5 years. In this way, voting allows us to hold those in government accountable. Accountability involves the obligation of elected political leaders to answer for their decisions. If you approve of the government's performance since the previous election, or it is the only party that you feel happy with, you may want to re-elect the same political party or candidate. If you think the current government did not live up to your expectations and did not improve people's lives or passed policies that are not to be supported, voting allows you to show your dissatisfaction by choosing another party or candidate. If enough people feel the same, a different government may come into power. Zimbabwe's electoral system awards most seats in parliament on the basis of the constituency electoral system. This means that whoever gets the most votes in a constituency, whether aligned to a political party or not, is declared the winner and therefore elected as a member of parliament. The remaining parliamentary seats are awarded in proportion to the total number of votes a party receives in an election. This means that even parties that obtain a low proportion of the votes can gain representation and influence decision-making processes in parliament. Thus, even if the party that you voted for is not represented in government, it can still use its role in parliament to monitor the governing party and hold it accountable to what it promised and to the constitution. We explain this in more detail in our Civics Academy video, How Does the Electoral System Work in Zimbabwe? The majority of people in Zimbabwe only enjoyed the right to vote from 1980. Before that, the minority colonial government ran Zimbabwe and many people's voices were not heard. The right to vote was an important driving force behind the liberation struggle. The principle of one man, one vote is the cornerstone of any democratic and free society and the basis for equality. The right to vote is entrenched in the Bill of Rights in Chapter 4 of our Constitution. The Constitution affirms the right of Zimbabwean citizens to participate in all elections. By voting, you play a part in keeping Zimbabwe's democracy alive and healthy. A successful democracy can only survive and flourish if citizens see their participation in the political process as their responsibility, even if you're not happy with your political leaders. As an individual, voting is the easiest way to contribute to and participate in the democratic process. By taking part in elections, we help our democracy work. Elections make democracy happen. By voting, we safeguard the rights we hold dear. So why should you vote? You should vote because you care about the future of your country. You should vote to support the current government or alternatively to support the opposition if you believe that either a strong opposition or even a change of government is necessary. And you should vote simply because in a democracy, you can.